Pradeep, for joining us on this version of expert series or talks with coaches.
Thank you, Ram.
Thank you. To all the people who are watching this video, a little bit of introduction about Pradeep. Pradeep is co-founder of newword.me, a digital coaching platform that offers affordable and accessible and personalized coaching to young professionals, startups, and small businesses, founders, and students, right? Uh, and students who are entering their work life, and he brings in experienced certified coaches to enable this process. He himself is a professional certified coach, PCC, from the International Coach Federation. He's a fellow coach with BetterUp and CoachUp, two of the largest coaching platforms in North America and in Europe. He has got more than 3 years of experience in financial services in senior leadership roles. The most notable that caught my attention was him being managing director at a Standard Chartered Bank, Singapore, out there. The traveler, an amateur photographer, and just before we started recording, we were exchanging stories about Goa and his plans of the future and doing some organic farming out there. So Pradeep, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ram. So just one small sort of correction. I spent 35 years in the banking industry. That was in my previous life.
Previous life, okay.
So yeah, I mean it's been a fascinating journey. In fact, in some ways, I believe that it was meant to be where I am today. And I think the universe was conspiring to get me to where I've gone today. And, we'll talk a little bit about why I am doing what I do.
Yeah.
But my 31st, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, I know when you're talking about the universe conspiring, right? I think that is the most interesting point. What happened? How did you become a coach? Talk to us about the journey. How was it for you?
Sure. So Ram, when in my last assignment with the bank I was with, which this must have been like 10 to 12 to 15 years ago, my HR guys came up to you one day and said, we're going to get you a coach. And my first sort of response or reaction to that was, why? Can't you guys see the gray hair? Can't you see the number of years I've spent in the industry? Don't you know the kind of position I hold? Don't you realize that I have all the experience? I don't need someone to tell me how to do my job. This was in the days when there was no video calls. It was just audio. I was in Singapore, my coach was in Bangalore.
Okay.
And so they said, no, we've decided, management decision, we've decided we're going to put you through this whole process. And I think at that time, even my HR folks were not educated enough to be able to explain to me what exactly coaching involved. So I guess it was part of the tick the box thing, maybe. I don't know. These are the guys who, we should get coached. So when my coach reached out to me, I put up a wall around myself. And she'll never admit it today, but I believe I was a jerk for the first 3 or 4 sessions. I was just stalling.
Yeah.
Every time she'd ask me a question, I'd say, I don't see why I need to tell you, or something like that. I was just being completely non-cooperative because my mind was not able to accept the fact that I have to get someone to tell me what to do. Until I gradually started to realize it's not about my job, it's not about my experience, it's not about my knowledge of banking as a business. And I'd spent my entire life in business roles. So I was always in a P&L role. I was always driving business, relationship, growth, budgets, all the usual stuff we do in sales. And because my mind was not accepting this, I was just being the way I was. And all credit to her. I've never met her even till today. I am in touch with her once in a while. We do WhatsApp each other. But all credit to her, she gradually broke my wall down, and all my resistance and my insecurities and my fears around why am I being put through this. And when she finished that assignment with us, my only question to her was, how do I become a coach? And that's the impact that those conversations had on me.
Wow.
So she did tell me about, what coaching is, how do you certify, what are the various agencies you can certify with, etc. And I parked that thought. A few years later, I decided I wanted to transition into what I call the give back phase of my life. So I no longer wanted to pursue livelihood as we know it, doing a job, whatever, earning to do something. Um, so I kind of reached out, and bankers are pretty useless people. So they really don't know very much. They take money from somebody, they give money to somebody else, they make a cut in the middle, and that's banking. And when I used to do guest lectures and teaching in Singapore with the universities there, I used to ask these young kids, uh, you know, why do you want to become bankers? Why wouldn't you want to become an architect? Why don't you want to be an engineer? Why wouldn't you be a doctor? Why wouldn't you be? There are so many other meaningful professions in the world where you can actually add value. Banking probably comes at the bottom of that heap, except bankers get paid lots of money, and that was the driver for a lot of them. I get to be an investment banker, I make lots of money, life is all good. Um,
Hmm.
so when I started this whole I need to unwind from being a banker thing, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I mean, what can a banker do? Pretty much nothing other than financial services. And so I reached out to people I knew. And I went and started working with a startup based out of Chennai that delivers financial services to deep rural India. Small villages in Tamil Nadu, in Orissa, in Uttarachal. Uh, and I said to them, you know what? Some of my colleagues quit very young in their careers and came to be work on this mission.
Mhm.
I want to do the same thing, even though I'm much older now. But my realization, I'm a slow learner. I've just realized, hey, I need to do something more meaningful in life. Um, can I come add value to whatever you do? And they said, we can't afford you. And I said, I'm not here for the money. So we had a very clear understanding. They would pay me whatever they thought they could pay me, which is a fraction of what I used to earn. But then I was clear why I was there. And I said, I don't want a title. I don't want succession planning. I don't want to be anything. I just want to add value to what you guys do. And so give me the freedom to add that value wherever I want. So I used to work with the downstream company, CEO, strategy, capital raise, rebrand, ESOPs, things I'd never done in my life. Also, I wanted to learn. So it was a good place for me to kind of learn some of that. I did that for 3 or 4 years, wonderful 3 or 4 years, because I spent a lot of time in the villages. But I also realized this is not, I don't want to get up at 9 o'clock in the morning and go anywhere. And by then, I'd certified to be a coach because that thought had stuck with me. When after my experience, I think this is a great way to help people. I want to do this. I've also realized much later in my journey that giving is a core value for me. Now, all my life I've given in different ways, through relationships, through whatever, but I never was able to think about how to crystallize that giving into something meaningful that would impact a larger number of people than your immediate circle. And that's how I got into becoming a coach.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Um, this, I think, is one of those things which keeps up coming again and again, right? You go through coaching and that inspires you in terms of becoming a coach yourself, or and probably even how to pay it forward or give it back.
Yeah.
The thing that I picked up is again intriguing for me is you said previous life. Uh, you also talked about mission. You're talking about giving it back. There is a lot which is there. So if you could unpack that for us in terms of where you are headed in this journey, um, and how is it opening up for you?
So, like most coaches, Ram, when once I'd certified, I didn't know what to do with it. So I went to friends who were CEOs of companies and said, "Hey guys, I'm a coach now." And Some of them were kind enough to say, okay, given your experience and everything, I've got the senior leadership person, why don't you coach him or her? And so I started coaching CXO level people. I also realized I enjoyed it. It was like, I loved the process. I loved the learning I got from it as a coach. But somewhere in a couple, 3 or 4 months into this journey, I said, this is not why I coach. It's not to earn. I mean, I understand these guys are kind enough to pay me, but I don't feel that this is the segment. This segment already is got enough and more coaches who are taking care of it. Senior leadership in companies has enough and more coaches who can they can work with. So I want to change the model. Uh,
So
yeah,
that's it, Praveen. A lot of people say coaching senior leaders is where there is a huge pyramidal impact. One person changing at the top in terms of the way they are impacts the culture of the organization, right?
sure.
How did you factor that into your thinking of when you're coaching executives?
The way I saw it, Ram, was I benefited from the process much later in life. If someone young could benefit from the process earlier in their lives, they would be able to then define their life journeys and make the changes they want to make earlier rather than later. Recognize their blind spots, figure out what they need from life, what their purpose is, what their goals are, where do they want to go, so that they don't get to be much later in life, like myself, say, hey, what am I doing as a banker?
So it's
Why am I
almost
even
like
here?
even before you get there, you're talking about at the early stages of the career itself, how can coaching help shape that career itself for them?
Correct. People talk about, oh, I do this, but I'm not passionate about it. I'm passionate about X.
Mm.
And that's what I really enjoy doing. I wish I could have done that. I wish I could do this. How do you help them unravel that? Yeah, you can. It's all about how, where you want to go. What do you enjoy? What makes you happy? Um, and that's when I pivoted and I said, I don't want to go coaching senior level. I'm going to start coaching young people pro bono.
Mm.
And so again, I reached out to, younger people I knew of, saying, I'm a coach. I'm not going to charge you. It's just a cup of coffee. Can I coach?
Mm.
And people said yes. And so I started coaching. Um, and as I started that process, the second pivot happened, which is something that's given for free is not appreciated or valued.
Mm.
And when I realized that, I said, yeah, because people don't show up for sessions, they cancel last minute because there's no skin in the game. They need to have skin in the game.
Okay.
And so then I started telling people who came to me to be coach, saying, you have to pay me. You pay me whatever you think you can pay me based on your economic status. I'm not challenging it. If you tell me I can only pay you 1,000 rupees for a session, I'm fine with that.
Mm.
Um, to be fair to a lot of them, because they're sort of wherever they were in life, they did come up with, like, somebody said 3,000, somebody said 5,000. But I also told them, I said, you may not have to pay me at all, but that money that is accumulated over all these sessions might go to a charity of my choice. So what I do with the money is up to me.
Mm.
With God's grace, and again, like, the universe was kind. Livelihood was not a driver for me. I didn't need to do livelihood anymore. Um, and so I again stayed with this young bunch of people and soon became coach my boss, coach my sister, coach my brother, coach my friend, coach my colleague. And I was pretty much coaching people around the world.
Wow.
And I loved the process and I loved the transformation I saw in young people. When somebody turned around to me and said, I'm version 2.0 of myself, that's great. Now just go fly, go discover the world. People who were emotional wrecks and were crying in the first few sessions suddenly became so confident, and their CEOs are writing to me saying, what did you do to this person?
Wow.
And
Amazing.
and for me, that's the real payback. That's the return on investment. That's everything that I coach for. I also One of the things I also do is mentor startups, again pro bono. And I realized there's an opportunity to coach startup founders because of all the stresses and everything else they go through. So the second sort of bucket then became startup founders and small business owners, and how do you help them think through where they want to go? What is the relationship between co-founders? How effective is it? How is their relationship with investors? Um, how do they have, manage more emotional control? Just stuff like that. I can see a question coming up. So
No, no, this is one of those things where I'm thinking, as a founder myself, I'm saying, okay, I think I should go to Pradeep and get coached by, because we go through all of that, right? So I'm making a mental note for myself, side note.
um, and maybe before COVID happened, I first reached out to a couple of very senior coaches and said, hey, why don't we take this mass market? Why don't we just get together, create this platform that will allow us to coach young people early in their lives who can't afford to pay what coaches normally charge? Uh, and just, for want of a better word, democratize the process. And essentially, what I got back was, I don't I have no disagreement with what they said, but was, why would we do something like this when we charge 50,000 rupees for a session? Why would we go do some 3, 4, 5,000 rupee per session thing? Um, because and you also don't do it because it'll ruin the business, the whole coaching business. And I said, yeah, well, that's a valid point, because for you guys, I'm seeing this very differently, but for you guys, it's your business, and why would you let margins get eroded in that business for yourself? Uh, then COVID happened. I got used to coaching people on whatever, the virtual space. I wrote to the CEO of BetterUp, and I said, why don't we launch a stripped down version of your platform? Let's call it BetterUp Lite, for want of a better word, for the Indian market,
Hmm.
focused on small business owners, startup founders, young professionals, students. He was kind enough to get back to me to say, great idea, but we are not ready for it yet. We work with global companies, da 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 da. India is not a focus market right now. But the thought stayed with me until I discovered you guys. Um, and then I said, wonderful. So now there is a platform that exists. I'm going to test it. I'm going to see how effective it is. Um, and if the technology is in place,
Hmm.
then it's all about just marketing and executing then on that dream I have of making coaching more mass market, making it more affordable, more accessible. And so that's when I signed up for Simply.Coach. I used it for a few months, and then I started talking to other fellow coaches saying, I plan to do this.
Hmm.
Now, my co-founders in newer.me were individuals I had coached. And after I coached them, they became coaches.
Hmm.
And so when I'm telling them I want to do this, they said, hey, we want to do this with you. Um, However, I was clear that I didn't want them to put in cash equity, because the moment you put in money, then you're chasing return on investment in the traditional sense. So they have sweat equity,
Hmm.
but they haven't put in any cash. I'm the sole cash provider, and my measure of return is not financial. My measure of return is impacting as many lives as we can through this process. There's obviously an OPEX to cover. So just have to make sure the operating income covers the OPEX. But what are 5-year plans, 3-year plans? What do I want to do? How do we want this to scale? I live from day to day. I talk to clients, I talk to companies, I tell them, get your young people coached. It's affordable. You don't have to worry about it from a return on investment perspective, because what you pay for one session, you can get 6 sessions. So, so no CEO or senior management persons come back to me to say, hey, this is unaffordable for us to do across a
Hmm.
larger section of people. And we are still testing different models. But in April, that's how New Work got born. And it's a journey. Um, let's just see how much impact we can make. And I'm talking to universities, I'm talking to deans of business schools, I'm talking to various investors who are saying, would you want your investee companies to be coached? Would you want the founders to be coached? Some of them been kind enough to say yes. I also reached out to coaches who we knew between us to say, will you come coach for a cause?
Mm.
Uh, Please continue doing whatever you're doing as part of your livelihood as a coach. But if you think you can afford to give a little bit of time to make a difference to society for a fee that's a fraction of what you earn in your practice, and if you're aligned with our purpose, our values, and our mission, just give us some time and your experience and your skills as a coach to help transform some young person's life. I've also seen Ram through experience when in large companies, and I've seen a number of my colleagues get impacted by this, people recognize individual performances. So as long as my numbers are being delivered, as long as I'm achieving whatever I'm supposed to achieve or overachieving, managements tend to disregard bad behavior. This guy is a star. This guy is a performer. Why would we upset anything here? Sure, is badly behaved. Sure, doesn't know how to treat people. Sure, doesn't know all of that. But you know what? The numbers are more important. This is my experience.
Mm.
However, like life, there are always ups and downs, and a star performer will encounter bad years. When the bad years happened with colleagues, I suddenly found behavior started to service as a reason for them to be told, you're not good enough.
Mm.
You don't know how to treat your team. You are a micromanager. You don't trust your people, whatever.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, somebody who's been a star for, let's say, so many years, suddenly being told that you are not good enough, it's how do I accept that? But you promoted me, you paid me so much money, you know, so what if I'm having a bad couple of years?
Yeah.
Managements have no patience for the bad couple of years. They want the numbers. They still got to answer to their investors, shareholders, whatever.
Correct. Yeah.
And so this person is then set up for failure
Mm.
and has low self-esteem, feels I'm not good enough, and they go through their own anxieties and pressures. The reason we want to look at younger people is why set them up for that failure, which will happen at some point in their lives. There will be bad days, there will be bad years, but if you can adjust your behaviors, if you can ensure that you are always somebody who has lives your values and is true to them, then even in a bad year, nobody is going to have the opportunity to tell you you don't know how to behave. And that's the sort of essence of what we are trying to do, at least with this whole young professionals in the corporate world space.
Yeah. Uh, so, Pradeep, couple of things, right? Now, if you were to look at coaching, perhaps it was at the at the top level, but there has been a lot of investment going on in terms of training, soft skills training, mentoring. Quite a bit has happened in there, unstructured and structured fashions out there. How is coaching at that career stage really contributing beyond whatever has been done?
So firstly, like I said, managements couldn't be bothered with coaching somebody that far down the totem pole.
Mm.
It's just not worth the investment at that stage. It's as you get to be more senior is when it's supposedly become more valuable to the organization, and then they want to retain you, and then they use different ways to be able to do that. One of them is, hey, let's get this person a coach, because this person needs to make it to the next level. They need to iron out certain behavioral traits.
So do you convince them on the value of that person at this stage because they are going to look at only value from what is top line or bottom line, right? How do you convince them to say,
No,
coach
I
this
think
person?
I think what we say to them is, if you want this pool of future leaders, if you want this pool of talent to grow with you as an organization, invest in them earlier rather than later.
And how do you balance that conversation with, quicker churn or quicker turnovers which are happening, people moonlighting? How do you have those conversations to invest?
All of that will happen.
Hmm.
I think that's a reality that everyone needs to accept. People will move on. People will not spend their careers in one organization. But the chances of the individual staying on longer and being more productive at work are higher if this person has had a higher level of self realization and their own goals in life. Then
Hmm.
that whole objective of I just need to switch jobs because I'm not getting satisfaction. What does satisfaction mean to you?
Hmm.
Now, how can your company, wherever you are today, be able to provide that satisfaction that you're looking for?
Interesting.
Uh, Respect is important to me. Recognition is important to me. It's not always about the compensation. That's just one factor. Also, what we've seen is, and this is, I guess, what applies to the coaching process, right? Is when the realization comes to self, is when you actually do what you need to do and you sort of settle yourself down. Any amount of training, any amount of mentoring, any amount of somebody telling you how you should behave, what you should do, is not going to register with you, or it'll be superficial until you've had that aha moment and that realization saying, yeah, this is why I am here.
Is that aha moment, and I go back to what you said in the beginning, right? You resisted coaching till the penny dropped. Is that different for young professionals?
No. So it all depends on, so young professionals paying for their own development,
Ha,
that doesn't come up as there's no fear there, right?
ha,
I want to change myself. I want to do better in life, whatever their objectives are.
yes.
Where there's a sponsor paying for the assignment, it definitely surfaces. So what we try and do is address it earlier rather than later.
Hmm.
Our conversations are confidential. Nothing that you say to us will be ever shared. There's a code of ethics we follow.
Hmm.
On the platform, there's a confidential space in which we will exchange notes, conversations, details of what we've discussed that nobody else has access to.
Hmm.
Um, that in part addresses, but not always. Sometimes it's that lurking fear is still always there until they've done a few sessions. And then they realize, hey, these guys are not talking anything about, you know, whatever, because we take periodic line manager check-ins. How's this person doing? Do you see any change in them? And there's no reference to any detail of conversation that this individual may have had.
Very, very interesting question coming up here, right? During the coaching process itself, a lot of times senior professionals will also bring in or attempt to bring in problem solving. And because you're a senior leader, they might say, how do I do this? How do I delegate? It gets into problem solving. Whereas the way you're talking about, it's a lot more of where am I? Where do I want to go? What is meaning for me? So is the nature of conversation more purist coaching at these levels than at senior levels?
I've seen both. I think with younger people, it's more of a purist coaching conversation.
Hmm.
With more senior people, it gets into problem solving, solutioning mode. At which point, at least I personally, as a coach, what I do is, do you want me to play consultant today?
Hmm.
If you want me to play consultant, I'm going to take off my coaching hat, I'll wear my consultant hat, and let's talk about your problem. This is not a coaching session, this is a consulting session. Sure, if that's what you want. But remember, your situation is different from mine, your experience is different from mine, your industry may be different from mine. Uh, what I did need not necessarily apply, or my advice need not necessarily apply to you. But if you still want to take it, then let's do a consulting session. Happy to.
A lot of times, at least the learning and development team comes back and say, can you do group coaching? It seems to be more efficient. in terms of budgets. Also, it seems to me that there is a possibility for peer learning at this level, which might, which they might benefit from there. Do you come across that construct as well?
Uh, yes, and so I'm pivoting again in my thinking, Ram. I don't believe group coaching works. I did not believe group coaching worked.
Did not, okay?
And the reason I continue to hold that belief to a large extent is because in a group, I will never ever unbear my soul. I will never ever be fully transparent.
Hmm.
It's like having internal coaches in a company, or it's like having mentors in a company. I'll just say what I need to say to make sure that my career goes fine.
Hmm.
I'm not going to talk about my innermost fears. I will not ever sit down with a bunch of peers and be completely transparent and open. And that's the reason I think we kind of stayed away from group coaching as a concept.
Hmm.
However, what where I'm adjusting my thinking now is if one had a couple of group sessions followed by individual sessions, so like a hybrid model, this individual might have said something in the group, but actually has much more to say in the one-on-one that will come up in the one-on-one.
Very interesting.
And so we're kind of designing now what we call our program the Leadership Nursery Program. We're now redesigning it
Hmm.
to actually throw in a couple of group sessions,
Nice.
which will be more very, it'll not get drilled deep. It'll be more general stuff, knowing yourself, knowing what sort of leader you want to be, whatever it is. But you have some takeaways from there that you then go discuss with your coach.
Beautiful. I love the fact that these experiments are happening and more emerging in terms of individuals, groups. How does it combine together? Pradeep, mindful of time here.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of questions which for coaches who are coming up, right? One is, how is coaching going to be different in the next couple of years in the Indian context compared to probably 5-10 years back? What do you think?
So I think there's a huge opportunity here. Um, it's just that people in India have not been exposed to the concept.
Hmm.
It's still relatively new. It's been limited to just a senior management level. So when you look at India as a country that's largely of self-employed people, how does one reach all of those people who are small business owners, etc., etc.?
Hmm.
Um, Second is, how does one reach the hinterland? How does one reach? How does one coach people in their vernacular? How does it's a human being is the same just because they can't speak to you in English, it doesn't mean that they don't go through the same challenges. So, how do you start to address this large audience who don't have anyone to really have a conversation with in a safe space? And as a society, we were essentially around the whole joint family concept. And there used to always be someone in the family, some distant relative, some cousin, some uncle, somebody who'd play part coach in our lives. I can just go tell this person I started smoking. Uh, parents don't know. What do I do? Right. And this person would partly give you advice or partly just be that safe space in which you can air whatever you want to say. Um, Without fear that that would go back to your parents or whoever is. That's now disappeared. And that safe space in a large number of cases doesn't exist. As we go more and more nuclear, that's going to keep happening. And so who do you reach out to a safe space? It's your peers. Your peers are going through the same stresses that you're going through. And so they will give you solutions or say, yeah, I'm going through the same thing, but not help you think through what you need to do next. So I see this whole space which is unoccupied, and most coaches still going towards, again, to be fair to them, livelihood. Livelihood means you have to be paid something. So everyone's addressing that same space. It's like McKinsey would only go and consult with large corporates because they can afford to pay the large bills that McKinsey raises. McKinsey doesn't go consult with small business owners. They can't afford to pay McKinsey's fee. And how do we get more and more coaches, therefore, to think about giving part of their time to reaching audiences that don't have access?
Yeah. And I think you almost answered the next question for me, right? My next question was going to be saying, I'm a leadership and an executive coach. What can I do to get involved in coaching young professionals? And I guess the answer lies in saying that, look, you don't do this for livelihood. You do this because it's for a cause, right?
Yeah. So firstly, I'm not a big fan of the labels that we put on coaching. I understand people need to create their niches, and there are all kinds of niches: relationship, career, life, whatever. Essentially, the core sort of skills that a coach has does not change just because your career or relationship or trauma or whatever people want to call themselves. As long as you can bring those core skills to the table and help people become better versions of themselves, you've achieved whatever you wanted to achieve as a coach.
True, 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 true.
There is still the livelihood question to answer, right? It can't, if every coach said, hey, you know what, then it's, as a profession, people wouldn't be interested in really becoming coaches.
Yep.
So it's a very, I think it's also in part a very personal choice that people may want to make as coaches.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess, Pradeep, folks like yourself are creating the platforms that allow folks to make the choice. I could say 70% of my time I spend in doing this, which is livelihood. 30% I want to give back, and those choices are now coming up. Platforms are enabling that. People like yourself are contributing to create that platform as well.
And that's the intent. That's, if we could create this community of coaches who are essentially getting paid a little bit of money to do what they do, but are not seeing this from that lens. They're seeing this from contributing, giving back to society. We could have a much larger impact on sort of our population and our young people.
Beautiful, Pradeep. Again, it's a joy, it's a privilege to be partnering with you in this journey out there. And
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for
And
joining
my
us.
privilege.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us here in this conversation. Always lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.